Welcome, everyone. I am William. The topic I have prepared for you today is large-scale Scrum World. Where does it lead? The session will walk you through one of the experimentation of large-scale Scrum done with one of the line project. And I will begin with some background information on the team's mindset and belief, and this should help you to understand why we choose to do the experiment. And then I'll talk a little bit about LeSS. I won't go into too much detail, but just enough so that you understand the content of this session. And then I'll talk about the actual LeSS experiment, and I will end with where we are 1 year after the experiment. Background. First of all, I want to tell you that this is not a large-scale Scrum lecture. I will talk some basic LeSS overview for the purpose of understanding the terms used and the content of this session. I will not talk into details about the reasoning behind LeSS principle, nor will I debate what is the best approach. Because basically, we don't stick to a particular Agile methodology. We actually embrace Agile values and mindset. So with that said, we think the most important thing is trust. You cannot call yourself Agile if there's no trust. So in order to achieve that, we believe that you need to be transparent, you need to over-communicate, and you need to stay open-minded. And by staying open-minded, you are more willing to learn from others' suggestions and advice, and hence increase collaboration. And the last is basically the literal meaning of being Agile. We wanted to be flexible to change, and we wanted to respond fast to the changes in the market. The project that did the experiment is linedevday. linedevday is a news content delivery platform. It's similar to Japan's Line News, except that it delivers news in 4 different locations: Taiwan, Thailand, Indonesia, and Hong Kong. Looking at the screen capture, you should get a sense of how much different the requirements that we get are. And as we implement this requirement, user base grow in each of the location. As user base grow, we receive more requirements to implement. This is a good thing. And before you know it, linedevday increased the team size to more than 40 people, with members from backend, frontend, QA, service planner, and UI UX designer. But increasing the team size didn't really get the expected result that we were hopeful. As the team size grow and the delivery items grow, we actually begin to experience a lowering trust. The most obvious is business owner's request now takes longer to deliver. It's not too surprising. As you have more requirements together to be delivered and more people collaborating together, it becomes more complex, right? And so QA, for example, they need more time to test to ensure that we deliver with the same quality. And suppose a requirement misses the sprint planning this time, the next sprint planning is 1 month away. And suppose it gets implemented in the next sprint, then the earliest possible for the delivery date of this requirement can be up to 2 months. This is when we said, hey, we need to try something different. Let's try LeSS. I'll talk a little bit about LeSS principle here. There are a total of 10 principles, but I will just talk about the ones that's most relevant to this session. The first one I will talk about is LeSS is Scrum. LeSS also believes in empirical process control, transparency, and self-managing teams. LeSS is the abbreviation for large-scale Scrum. So looking at the meaning, it's basically Scrum scaled. Okay, it is Scrum. And the principle that's most unique to LeSS is called more with less. LeSS believes that you need to descale first if you wanted to scale your development. By descaling, it means you should have less roles, artifacts, and processes. So less roles simply means removing the barriers between functions, such as developer and QA, removing barriers from manager and lead so you can have a more self-organized team. And you should have just one single product owner to avoid having multiple POs prioritizing. And by having less artifact, it's mostly talking about having just one single product backlog. And also LeSS believes that the less processes you enforce on a team, the more responsible they become. And that's more with LeSS. LeSS is Scrum, so it has all the ceremonies that Scrum has, and it did split the sprint planning into sprint planning 1 and sprint planning 2. And then it also has the Scrum's daily, team daily and team retrospective. And it talks about an open space format for conducting the product backlog refinement meeting and sprint review. I will talk about that later in detail. And then there's the overall retrospective, which is basically members from different teams come together and then we discuss cross-team or cross-function issues. Now, before we actually conduct the experiment, there are some team anxiety with LeSS. For example, they ask, how do we measure the success or failure of this experiment? This is a very valid question to ask because during the course where linedevday increased the team size to more than 40 people, the team did try to break down into smaller teams. So we formed from 1 team to 2 teams and then to 3 teams. And as we increase the number of teams, collaboration and communication becomes more difficult. Now, according to LeSS, a team should have no more than 8 people per team. So the least amount of team that we have should be 4 teams, which is one more team. So it should increase the difficulty for collaboration. How will LeSS help address this issue, right? So if LeSS works well, great. But what if it doesn't? How do we know that we are doing better than what we were doing before? So we need some way, some format to measure what we were doing before, right? So the team did some brainstorming, and we couldn't come up with a really good idea how to measure and compare. So the team thought, maybe we should just go ahead and do the experiment by setting a baseline. So the baseline is a first target goal, which we will have. So if we are able to meet this first target goal, that means we are on the right track. And so we can just progress and move forward from there. So the first target goal that we set was 1 single backlog as specified by LeSS, 4 Scrum teams, and 2-week sprint. So we went ahead with the new workshop which LeSS suggested to form the new teams. The idea is that we should form four cross-functional teams with well-rounded in technical expertise. For example, we should have QA, backend, frontend, DevOps, etc. And one of the interesting things is during this workshop, member can have a chance to choose which team they wanted to be part of. And if the case you choose a team with a lot of friends, then you're already on a big step toward forming a high trust and high collaborative team, which is what we wanted. And the end result is we formed 4 cross-functional teams, and we have 2 Scrum Masters, each handling 2 teams. We have 1 single product owner. And for the service planner and designer, we were unable to evenly fit them into the teams due to headcount limitation. For example, if you have a team without UI UX, or if you have a team with extra service planner, it doesn't fit quite well with the word balanced team. So we have to keep them as separate shared resource. And as for the dev lead, LeSS did recommend to try to avoid having a lead or manager interference. And for the most case, this is true with the new team structure. The team pretty much self-organized. However, there are important cases where we still require to have a dev lead to help to make the ultimate decision, because linedevday is a really big project with a large user base. So we have to be responsible to the user in, for example, performance issues or security issues, right? And in this case, the lead trusts the team to propose solutions. And in the case where there are conflicting solutions, it is more efficient to have a dev lead to step up and ultimately pick the right solution for the team to move forward. So in this case, the lead trusts the team to make a good solution. And on the other hand, the team also trusts the lead to make the good solution. And so that's our new team. And we also make a small plan to ultimately reach the 2-week sprint goal. So what we did was, right after the new team forms, we will start executing the 2-week sprint. And at first, we may be bad at estimation because we are used to the 1-month sprint, but that's okay because we will use the second sprint as a buffer sprint for anything that's carried over from the first sprint and to implement smaller features. That way, we keep our original delivery speed of delivery every month. And as we progress and gets better at estimation, eventually we will be able to reach to have 1 potential shippable increment per sprint, and therefore we can have a release every sprint. And that's our plan for the sprint cycle. How we carried out the ceremonies for the sprint planning, we basically follow what Les suggested with the sprint planning 1 and sprint planning 2. We call it overall planning and single team planning. For the overall planning, basically everybody gathers around the backlog, and then the PO briefs the whole team on the sprint goal and priorities. And then members from each team, they pick tickets, and then they trade the tickets to maximize productivity. And then they take the final picked ticket back into the single team planning, which is the planning that most of you are familiar with. As for the product backlog refinement, Les suggested an open space format. So you have a big open space and you have separate small groups. Each group breaks down and refines a ticket from the backlog. And once they finish, they share back result with the other teams. Now, linedevday tried this out for several times, but there are some problems. For example, even though we have a big room and each group refines ticket in the corner, but during the refinement, there's still a lot of background noise. So it makes it really difficult for the team to concentrate. And when sharing back the result with the other group, it may still be easy to miss out critical details which was discussed during the refinement. So we thought maybe it works best if we perform the refinement as if the team will implement the ticket during the sprint planning. Hence, we decided to run the PBR meetings similar to what we do in sprint planning meetings. So teams gather on an overall PBR, and then they pick and trade tickets with each other, and then they go back to each single team to perform single team PBR. And only if the case where the team cannot take the story and have to give to another team, we will host a separate short session for the small meeting to do the PBR on that ticket. So that's how we did the PBR. For sprint planning, let's also suggest a big open space, but in this case, it's a bazaar-like format. You have different stands in bazaar, right? So each stand is it has a presenter and presents the demo. And you have users and stakeholders, they can just walk up to the stand and listen to the demo and offer feedback. And once that's done, they move to the next stand and repeat the same process. Now, we tried this out for several times, and there are also some problems. The idea for the bazaar-like is that you can have a better discussion with smaller group. So that, and not all users are interested in listening to all of the demos and presentations. So you save time that way. But we tried this several times, and we thought maybe this works best for really, really large teams, such as 100 people or 200 people, where you have 20 stands. But for today, we can easily contain all of the presentation within 1 hour plus discussion. So maybe it'll work out best if we have just one single presenter and take sequence, and then so everybody can listen through all of the presentation. So that's how we did the sprint review. As for the overall retrospective, we did what the LeSS specified, where we have everybody gathers and we talk about team velocity, health check, resourcing issues, cross-team or functional collaboration improvement, and any lesson learned to share with the other teams. Now, during the course of the sprint execution, the team did several continuous improvements. They got better at planning and PBR. They got better at task breakdown, estimation, and ticket exchange. And they find better ways to share knowledge across different teams and across functions. And they become more responsible by finding better ways to do gradual rollout. And for features that takes more than one sprint, they do feature toggle. They increased the automation coverage, and then they shortened QA regression time while keeping the delivery quality to eventually reach the 2-week sprint goal. Now, remember I talked to you about that LeSS is a Scrum? So one of the things which is required is that every Scrum team should run on the same development sprint cadence to meet the one potential shippable. However, we came to a point where we need to tweak that a little. linedevday was having an architectural revamp, and we assigned one of the team as the leading team to design the new architecture. And since this doesn't interfere with the normal team's code base, we don't necessarily need to have the leading team to also wait every 2 weeks for deployment. They should be able to deploy daily, right, to maximize efficiency. So we thought we should separate this leading team and with their own separate backlog, and that worked really well until we are about to bring back the architectural changes to the feature team. The team immediately thought that we need to regroup this leading team and regroup the backlog into the single backlog so that you avoid doing double work. So that's a little sidetrack we had with LeSS plus Kanban. Now, some may say we may have moved away from LeSS through all the sprints and all the changes that we made, but you can still find some fundamental traces of LeSS in what we do. For example, we are still running the ceremonies specified by LeSS, although we made some tweaks to it. But these ceremonies are short sessions, but they work out quite well in efficiently helping the teams keep in sync in terms of information and knowledge. Where will we go next? We may continue to evolve and progress forward from where we are because the delivery is pretty smooth at the moment. As one of our stakeholders did, after LeSS, it's more clear and stable for PM to control the pace of the delivery and roadmap with a consistent cadence. But again, we don't have to stick with LeSS, right? We welcome anything agile. We can try something different. We will keep finding ways to build up trust. We will keep finding ways to improve collaboration and be agile. That's all I have prepared for you today. Thank you very much for attending, and I'll see you next time.